This is a video to demonstrate how you would bind a satellite to the Cortex for those who want to use just a satellite directly hooked up to the Cortex and not go through a receiver in the wire loom. First thing to note, if you're using one satellite, it has to plug in on this side of the Cortex on the port closest to the communication port. As you can see here, I'm using a receiver battery and a switch. The reason for this is that it allows me to power cycle the Cortex quickly and effectively, which is what's required by the software when you're binding the DSMX satellite. For this video, I'm using a Lemon RX satellite. It works just like a Spektrum satellite. I've plugged in the power into a far port over here on the left. Any of your servo ports, your output servo ports, are fine for putting in power. I like to use these sides because there is a port over here, output 2, that you cannot put power into it. If you put power into it, it could cause damage to the Cortex. So just a quick demonstration here. As you can see, it powers up pretty quickly and lets me turn off power and then turn back on power, and I don't have to mess around trying to plug in a servo wire or anything like that. Okay, here we are in the software. As you can see, I have it USB cable here is connected. I went ahead and read all of my current settings in the Cortex. Since this is a Cortex I haven't set up yet, everything is still set at the factory defaults, so I haven't changed anything on this. So we're going to go up here to the top tab, click on the RC. This brings us to the first page. In here you'll see servo type, connection receiver, Cortex, channel assignments to failsafe PPM, sats, and only. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on this JR, Spektrum Sat, and then this will immediately light up all the channel assignments. You'll have to go through and make sure that the channel assignments are working the way you want for your model. This may take a little bit of time to play with, or if you remember what your channels are, this is telling you that channel A is associated with 1. The channel B on the Cortex is associated with 2, so on and so forth. You can click this button here. It'll program the fixed failsafe positions into the channel, throttle, and output 2. You basically have to have the RC transmitter on and set to the desired positions. But before we do that, I'm going to go over here and we're going to see that this isn't equal. We're going to click Write All. Once we do that, 2 new buttons pop up. A bind DSM2 button and a bind DSMX button. If you hover over it, it gives you little instructions. It says for binding Spektrum receivers to the radio in DSM2 mode. For binding Spektrum sats to the radio in DSMX mode, instead of the jumper on the Spektrum receivers. So what this does is essentially simulates the jumper on the Spektrum receiver and puts the satellite into a bind mode. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on this here, and it's going to say binding for Spektrum activated. If you hover over this instruction box, it'll tell you a little bit more about what you need to do. Again, it's telling you here that if only one satellite is used, it has to be plugged into the port side, the port where the PC socket connector is. And it says switch off the receiver and transmitter, then repower the receiver and satellites will flash, and then hold the bind button on transmitter. So I'm going to do that step here next. Okay, here is the Cortex. As you can see, it's still flashing here. We don't have a flashing light on the satellite yet. I'm going to go ahead and power cycle it really quick. This is why I like the switch, because it lets me do something like this pretty easy. You can turn it off, wait about 1 second, then turn it back on. The satellite should now be flashing. And now you would bind this like you would on your normal radio.
Binding. Bind failed.
As you just saw there, I had a bind fail, so I'm going to have to go back up, turn the Cortex back on, re-click on that bind DSMX button, re-power cycle again. It's flashing. The bind probably failed because I had the radio a little too close. Let me try moving the radio a little further away.
Binding. DSMX 22 mm.
Okay, now that the bind is complete, you can see you have a solid red light, or a solid light we would have on your Spektrum receiver, indicating that it has bound. Okay, now we're back at the software, and we've bound everything, and everything is good. We can go to the diagnose page. With everything still on, this is where you can verify
Mode 2.
what
Flight
channel
mode 1.
is associated with what from your radio. So here, with default Spektrum settings, channel A is associated with my throttle. D is my rudder. Elevator is controlling my throttle. B and C are controlled by my aileron. So this goes back to this page here, back in RC, where you make changes here till your sticks control the surfaces you want them to control. And then just make sure you remember to hit right all after you make any changes here. And then this is also where you can learn your fail-safe positions. You can click learn fail-safe positions, and then you have to have your transmitter on and everything in the position that you want. So once you've clicked learn fail-safe positions, you hit right all, and then it's done. My next video will be discussing these next two tabs here for your options, and then your bank 1 and bank 2.